Let's cross to Canberra now and catch up with the South Australian Coalition Senator and also the Social Services Minister, of course, Anne Ruston. Before I get to your issues, Anne, your state, your home state, what have they got against progress? I mean, you've got to have GM modifications in agriculture these days if you want to compete, don't you?
Look, absolutely, and I think the whole point here is about giving people choice. I mean, a farmer doesn't have to use GM products. I mean, they're more than welcome to maintain, their own GM-free properties. But it just gives the farmer the choice, and the consumer's equally got the choice as to whether they buy a product that's GM-free or has had used GM modifications in its production. So I think it's about choice and about being sensible.
Speaking of South Australia, what's your take on the argument about the Murray-Darling Basin plan? Calls now from Nationals in New South Wales to scrap it, demands for more water to be released in the upriver areas of southern New South Wales, northern Victoria. Of course, the water they're talking about is water that is rushing out of the Hume Weir at the moment, out of the upriver storages to go down to fulfil South Australia's entitlement. Why would South Australia need environmental flows now when these farmers desperately need it to keep their drought-ravaged properties going?
Look, as you know, I mean, I live in one of these communities and I can absolutely empathise with the despair that these farmers are feeling. I mean, to have to make the decision to turn the water off and watch your trees die over summer is absolutely devastating for any farmer. I know, I've done it. But I think one of the things that we do need to be very clear about is that we need a sustainable river system, but we also need a river system that keeps our river communities sustainable as well. And what I'd say to everybody, yes, I understand that the impact of this drought is having a major impact across most of eastern Australia, but we have to stay at the table. We have to continue to keep talking so that we can actually resolve this, so that the future of our communities, the future of our river is sustained into the future. So I suppose I'd just say, please, everybody, keep talking, because talking is the only way we're going to resolve this.
But is it the case that this water that's flowing out of the Murray and that a lot of farmers are not getting access to is water essentially to keep the Murray mouth open, to keep the Murray lakes near the mouth fresh water instead of saline?
Well, part of the river, I mean, the river system is a whole system, and we have to accept the fact that we can't just look at it in isolated valleys. The whole modelling around the operation of the river system is based obviously on an agreement that was achieved in 2012 by the 5 states and territories and the federal government, and the decisions about the operation of the river system were made then. What I think we do need to do is we need to realistically look at ways that we can assist our farmers through this really tough time. I mean, as you know, South Australia a couple of weeks ago made available water by turning on our desal plant so that we could provide 100 gigalitres of water to farmers in New South Wales and Victoria to grow the much needed fodder that we need for the farmers that are suffering from drought and trying to feed their animals. So I think we all need to get around the table and work out how we can make changes that are going to enable the plan to continue to be implemented, and the sustainability of our river system remains at the forefront of that. And that includes the sustainability of our river communities, because don't forget, we were the government that introduced the socio-economic requirement of the plan. It's not merely environmental outcomes that we're seeking here, but we need to be alive to the socio and economic implications of the plan as well. And I think we just need to keep focused on delivering that triple bottom line. But as I said, I absolutely empathise with the farmers that are here in Canberra putting their case forward, because it is really tough when you've got to sit there when there is no water and you've got trees or you've got animals or stock that you need to be providing water for.
But if we go back to the last serious drought about 15 years ago, South Australia was looking at running out of drinking water for Adelaide. The Labor Premier at that time, Mike Rann, proposed putting a fresh weir at the bottom of the river at Wellington to store more fresh water in the river channel and allow the Murray lakes then to become estuarine, salty, tidal, and therefore preserve a lot more fresh water. Is that plan dead and buried, or is it worth re-examining that in the interests of saving more water for agriculture and river communities?
Well, look, to my understanding is that that's not a measure that's on the table at the moment, but I do know that Minister Littleproud has been talking about having a very thorough review about the really critical situation we find ourselves in. I understand that Mick Kelty, the independent commissioner, is intending to spend the next couple of months talking to all the people along the river communities about ways that we can deal with what is a serious situation. And to be fair, Chris, if we don't see inflows over the next few months, I mean, this situation is going to get much worse in 2020. So I think we do need to, as I say, we need to sit around the table, talk about options that may be available so that we can sustain our river communities through what is, once again, a very, very serious drought.
Yeah, and a sobering thought, as you say. It could get a lot worse before it gets better. Let's get to your portfolio area in social services, Anne Ruston, and talk about your efforts to extend the cashless welfare card. Labor suggesting that they'll only support spreading this card, making it available to more communities if it's voluntary. Is that a reasonable compromise?
Look, I mean, the legislation that's currently before the Parliament to change over the Northern Territory and Cape York from a form of income management, which is fairly basic, it's called the Basics card, to allow them the access to the new technology that the cashless debit card provides, it's really disappointing. The Labor Party used to be on a unity ticket with the Coalition in assisting people to deal with some of the consequences of cash-fuelled social harm. And then now all of a sudden they're saying that they only want an opt-in situation. I mean, the reality is that this is a financial management tool that has been proven to help people who find themselves in difficult situations, to address issues of social harm in communities, to help people better manage their circumstances so that they can make better of their lives for themselves and their families. So it is a bit disappointing to see that we now have a situation where Labor's completely changed their position on what we think is a very valuable social enhancement.
You talk about how it's been embraced, how it's been successful. There's a lot of evidence to support that. Of course, there are still plenty of critics. But to my mind, why isn't this being embraced universally? If it works and if the technology is there, why wouldn't this apply to some forms of welfare right across the country?
Well, look, certainly one of the great challenges that we think that we're very close to resolving is about making sure that the technology that sits alongside it makes it an almost seamless experience for the people that are on the card. Because one of the greatest criticisms has been that it sort of stigmatises the person. We've now changed the card so that it doesn't say on the card that it's a cashless debit card. It's just a plain silver card like any other credit card you might have or debit card you might have in your wallet. But as we're developing and improving the technologies, we're hoping that the card will be completely anonymous to the person who's using it. And then I think you're absolutely right, Chris, there is a broader application because we like to think, and I'm absolutely convinced this is a really good budgeting and financial management tool that many people who are on lower incomes and we can use it to provide them with assistance to budget better for their own circumstances.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought it's too much to ask people who are on welfare. Obviously, it's going to be a low income. This is an innovation that helps them to manage that income. Certainly, a lot of people would embrace it voluntarily. In your own state, there's a company, I think it's called My Budget, isn't it, that does this budget management for families, and has been a huge success. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Just on the Robodebt issue, this seems to be a monumental stuff up by government. Is there any assessment yet about how much money might need to be repaid because of the legal challenges against Robodebt?
Well, Minister Roberts, I understand, his department is currently looking through cases where the averaging method has been the only source of identification where a discrepancy might exist between ATO information and the information that Centrelink has. But what I would say, Chris, is that if anybody receives a letter or believe and it's indicated that there is a discrepancy between the information contained in these two agencies, don't ignore the letter. Contact Centrelink. There might be a perfectly reasonable explanation as to why that discrepancy exists, and it could be dealt with, and everything's fine. So, but as a government, we have an obligation when money is owed to taxpayers that we pursue that money because it's a debt owed to the taxpayers of Australia, and their government is. I think they would expect us to be pursuing people who owe a debt to the Commonwealth and owe a debt to the taxpayers to pursue that debt.